Good evening. Today is Friday, April 5th, 2013, and this is Flashback. I'm Michal Durek.
And I'm Jordan Hurley, and today we'll be talking about our former President, Clinton. Michael, why don't you give us a little more background information on Mr. Clinton and his election?
As the Cold War came to an end, voters wanted the government to address the huge federal deficit. On the Republican side was George Bush. On the Democratic side, Bill Clinton. The third candidate was Ross Perot.
On Election Day, Clinton won 44% of the popular vote versus 33% for Bush and 19% for Perot. In the Electoral College, Clinton gained 357 votes versus 168 votes for Bush and none for Perot.
Well, Clinton wanted to focus on improvement. He hoped to revive the economy and renew the nation's sense of community. And Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about our former First Lady of that time, Hillary Rodham Clinton?
Hillary Rodham Clinton is the wife of former President Bill Clinton and also his advisor. She wanted to take an approach to national health care. She planned to lead a task force of 500 people and travel throughout the country to speak with all concerned groups about education.
The way that former President Clinton wanted to go was to cut the budget of the American economy. The first part was very successful. Budget cuts, along with tax increases, were necessary to reduce the deficit. Of course, we know, with those cuts come a lot of complaints that he had to face.
Yet the plan almost did not get passed. The budget was passed by a 218 to 216 margin, and the deciding vote was up to former Vice President Al Gore.
Another thing that former President Clinton would like to change is our healthcare. The change in the healthcare was among everyone.
The plan went poorly, execution did not fulfill expectations.
And in the end, doctors wanted more money, for less choice, more taxes, and less quality.
The beginning of Clinton's presidency was very difficult. He had to face criticism from all sides of the community, even from his own supporters. He promised a lot of things that had never been done.
And that's all for this section. We will be right back after a short break.
Whenever there is school, there'll always be homework. Whenever there's a beat, there's always a drum. Whenever there's fun, there's always Coca-Cola, yeah.
Hey sports fans, are you ready for some basketball? As we all know, on April 5th, 1993, exactly 20 years ago, the game between two extraordinary teams took place in Louisiana Superdome. The game between Michigan Wolverines and North Carolina Tar Heels. Nearly 65,000 people were spectators of the game of the century. And right here is from us, the original footage of the time.
To Lynch. And he'll shoot one.
3-on-1.
Howard will challenge Salvadori. And that's a 10-point lead for Michigan. King got caught. Saved by Weber. Montross with two hands taken away by King. Jalen Rose gives it up last minute. Weber underneath for the Wolverines. Williams.
Oh, is that beautiful.
Tipped out to Montross.
That was Lynch. They've got the break.
Carolina can take the lead. Phelps up with it. And down it goes. Carolina leads by one.
Going inside, but it's tough to score in there with that double down help. Lynch on a tough shot.
Lynch to
There it
Montross.
is.
Got to take
There
it.
it is. You've got to look to score.
Jackson firing up a three.
He got it.
Huge one.
He got it.
Three to tie.
Got it.
Oh, it sure looked good. Weber underneath. 1-point game.
Long.
A 2 to tie. Michigan will have to bring it.
Oh, he
straight up.
walked. He walked and the referee missed it.
Weber brings it into the front court. They have no timeouts remaining.
Oh, he causes too many timeouts. That's a technical foul.
He called a timeout. Michigan doesn't
Yes.
have any.
He got by with a walk, and Jimmy calls a he calls a timeout. He doesn't realize that's Michigan's too many, and so it'll be a technical foul. North Carolina shooting and the ball. A huge mental mistake.
Weber thought they had a timeout in their pocket. Dean Smith, 8 seconds away from a second national championship. The Fab Five comes up short again. There you have it. North Carolina is the 1993 national champion.
Unfortunately, Michigan Wolverines lost by 6 points. Let's hope the next season will be better than this one. See you after a short break.
First, the back.
Yeah.
It's Rocky! It's wild!
He's back. It's Purplesaurus Rex from Kool-Aid. It's free hysterically.
He's wild, coming down. It's the purplest flavor around.
Purplesaurus Rex from
Hello,
Kool-Aid.
and welcome back. Going from our previous section, we spoke about the United States and their hardships worldwide.
First, we will take a look at the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin was elected president of Russia. He wanted to push Russia towards a Western-style democracy.
The transition to a free market economy, after decades of rigid controls, could not happen in a matter of days and/or weeks.
U.S. offered a $2.5 billion package aid to help this process. In the end,
In the
it was
end,
not
he
enough.
dissolved the parliament and called for a new legislature. Legislators resisted to this move, and 2 weeks later, the government tanks destroyed the building and more than 150 people died.
And yet another riot happened in the Eastern Europe. Former satellite nations threw off communist rule. 6 of those states have already established new regimes.
It has been a power keg, with the bomb inside that was about to explode, the anger and tension between the Serbs, Muslims, and Croats.
Croatia and Slovenia declared their independence in 1991. Violence spread among all nations around, mainly in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Clinton tried to pledge to send American troops as part of a peacekeeping force, but this was denied by Parliament.
Later on, in March 1994, Croats and Muslims begged they would politically
More
unite their
progress for
territories.
stability came in the Middle East. The world learned that the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel had been engaged in a secret negotiation of their own.
They were almost ready to sign a peace treaty, recognizing Israel's rights to exist and ending more than 50 years of hostility.
Over the years, violence between Palestinians and Israeli-occupied forces had made the regions into a virtual war zone.
Peacemaking was a prickly process, particularly between people who have been enemies for so long. On September 13, 1993, in a ceremony held on the White House lawn, head of Palestine Liberation Organization Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shook hands after signing
Months after the
agreement.
deadline for withdrawal of Israeli troops had passed in December of 1993, the future of Israeli-Palestine regions hung high in uncertainty. Now, let's have a look on African treaties. Americans, like people around the world, hailed the effort to overturn an apartheid.
In the mid-1980s, the U.S. Congress voted to impose economic sanctions to try to topple the repressive regime.
They were actions taken by one or more countries against another country to restrict the nation's trade by boycotting, blockading shipping, and other means. These sanctions included the ruling of prohibiting new American investment in one country.
In 1990, Frederick W. de Klerk, who was South African Prime Minister, recognized that he couldn't control the forces of change. He asked and later released Nelson Mandela, who was the leader in the struggle to end apartheid. Both of them received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993.
They set up the African National Congress, or the ANC, and they started their support for South Africa as a whole.
The 1990s saw a mixture of hope and frustration in the dealing of the United States with Western
One
Hemisphere
reflection of
neighbors.
the effort for a foster corporation in the Western Hemisphere was the North American Free Trade Agreement, or also known as NAFTA. This agreement's goal was to promote free trade between Canada,
It was
Mexico, and
supposed
the
to
United
form
States.
a single market similar to, but much larger, the European Community. And despite the opposition, the Senate finally approved the NAFTA treaty in November of 1993.
Did that wobble? Did that wiggle? Did that cup of Jello give a little jiggle? Anytime or any place, now you can have that fruity taste. Now the Jello put the wiggle in a cup.
Introducing Jell-O Gelatin Snacks, ready to eat in individual cups. It's refreshing, it's fruity, it's fun.
Now the Jello put the wiggle in a cup.
In your
Good evening, everyone. It's a lovely night tonight in Michigan. and I'm going to show you some of our weather patterns from April of 1993. To start off our month here, we see that it's a bit of snow. Also towards the end of the month, our weather patterns also being very sporadic throughout the month, going from around 36 degrees towards around 73. Also, a lot of precipitation starting around Thursday the 8th, which leads all throughout the month because April showers bring May flowers. And periodically throughout the month, we notice a lot. Our temperatures vary and are quite sporadic. They go from about 37 degrees to our highest of 73 degrees this month. And we still see some snowfall throughout the end of the month, which will hopefully slow down. And now back to our news program.
Welcome back.
We will now take a look into cultural diversity during the 90s.
The ethnic diversity increased rapidly in the early 1990s. We set for them bilingual education, in which students are taught in both the native language and English.
In the beginning, a lot of immigrants struggled and had hard times. Some people even felt that immigrants took jobs from working Americans, drained taxpayers' dollars, and threatened the stability of American culture.
A homemaker from Kentucky, Mary Goldsmith, even declared, "They bring different values, and that's why we have more crime and drug problems."
Once again, as in the past, the United States had to deal with the opposition to immigration. Later, as immigration increased and minority birth rates soared, the number of Americans with roots outside Europe rose dramatically.
African Americans continued to make major strides forward. They were increasingly visible in national politics as a result of the election of 1992.
This of improvement was among all the races represented in the United States. It was not only about race, but was later on about women.
In 1992, Congress, the Senate, included 6 women, and the House 48. Both were set as new records.
And this is not only happening in politics, but also happening in employment.
Another bar that received larger amounts of tolerance were homosexuals.
Former President Clinton was compromised to a campaign promising to lift the ban on homosexuals in the military.
In the spring of 1993, one of the largest marches in the United States history took place in Washington, D.C., where hundreds of thousands of Americans gathered to demand homosexual rights.
The increasing diversity in the United States was reflected in other ways. For example, religion was real. A lot of people realized that the desire to embrace rather than to exclude minority cultures is the key to multiculturalism.
So, advocates insisted that for minority students to develop self-esteem, they needed historical role models from their own ethnic groups.
Of course, there was also an opposition against this. The debate over multiculturalism was but a new wrinkle in an unequal American question of how to create a unified society from a nation of diverse immigrants.
And that will be everything from us tonight. Thank you for watching
Flashback.
I'm Michal Durek.
And I'm Jordan Hurley.
Good night.